What if silence isn't surrender, but domination? You've been told to speak, to explain, to defend, to make noise so they don't forget you exist. But Nietzsche, he didn't write for the performers. He wrote for the few who could stay quiet while the world screamed, because silence isn't absence. It's presence so complete, it disturbs. The loudest ones, they're the weakest. They speak not to express, but to protect. Not to reveal, but to cover the trembling underneath. And you? Maybe you've stayed silent, and you thought that made you weak, that not reacting meant losing, that walking away meant defeat. But what if that was the lie? What if the real power, the untouchable kind, lives in the ones who don't need to speak? This isn't about winning arguments. It's about exiting the stage, while others still perform. Look around. Everyone's shouting, explaining, convincing, needing to be heard. But not you. Not anymore. Because now, your silence is no longer fear. It's a verdict, a boundary, a throne. And in this war of noise, the one who refuses to speak commands. You think they won because they spoke louder, because their words cut sharper, because they walked away with the last sentence. You think you lost, because you stayed quiet. But that's the first illusion. They taught you that silence is weakness, that if you don't respond, you submit, that your power lies in explaining, defending, clarifying. But why? Who told you that speaking equals strength? Who made you believe that every thought needed to be unzipped and spilled? You were trained, like an actor, like a servant, to speak when provoked, to argue when questioned, to react when challenged. And you still think it's choice? Society doesn't value dialogue. It fears silence. It worships sound because sound can be controlled. Sound can be interpreted, misquoted, reframed. But silence? Silence terrifies, because it cannot be owned. Most conversations are not born from curiosity. They're born from fear. Fear of being unseen, fear of being wrong, fear of losing control. And the need to explain yourself? That's not self-expression. That's ego, naked and trembling, begging not to be erased. Every time you feel the urge to justify, to make someone understand, to correct their view of you, pause. Ask, who are you trying to convince? Them? Or the part of you that still believes you're not enough unless they agree? Nietzsche called this herd morality, the instinct to conform, to be understood, to be liked. It's not morality at all. It's a cage, a code of behavior written by the weak to survive the judgment of the loud. And you, yes, you, have lived in it for too long. You've confused speaking with strength. But sometimes, the strongest act is refusal. Refusal to explain. Refusal to be pulled into the circus. Refusal to offer yourself as entertainment to those who don't even listen. True strength doesn't shout. It doesn't explain itself. It simply is, like a mountain, unmoved by the weather. Your silence isn't emptiness, it's a boundary. It's a signal to the world. I do not perform for your comfort. And yes, it will disturb them. It will unsettle their ego. It will make them project all kinds of weakness onto you. But that's the point. Let them misunderstand you. Let them mock you. Let them think they've won. Because they don't know the truth, that your silence wasn't absence. It was dominance. You don't need to kill your ego with force. You need to starve it of applause, of validation, of the endless need to be right. And when you do, when you finally sit with the discomfort of not responding, something terrifying happens. You begin to see. You see the games people play. You see the insecurity behind their confidence. You see the manipulation wrapped in smiles. And more importantly, you see yourself. without the need to be liked, without the pressure to perform, without the mask. This is the silence Nietzsche spoke of, not the silence of defeat, the silence of the Übermensch, the overman, who no longer reacts because he's no longer owned. You were never meant to bark back every time someone pokes you. You were meant to withdraw, to observe, to rise above, because in this world, the moment you argue, you've already lost. Not because you were wrong, but because you stooped down to prove that you were right. That's the trap. And it's time to stop falling for it. Stop thinking your voice is your weapon. Sometimes, your silence is the blade, and the room doesn't even know it's bleeding. So now, step further, because silence is only the beginning. Let's explore what happens, not in you, but in them, when you stop reacting, when you offer them a mirror instead of a rebuttal, when your silence starts to shake the ground beneath their words. Silence isn't passive, it's a mirror, and not the gentle kind that flatters. It reflects you, raw, unfinished, unarmored. When you say nothing, you don't disappear. You become dangerous. A black hole in the middle of their noise. A void they can't fill, can't control, can't decode. That silence? It whispers what words never could. It says, I don't need to explain myself to you. And that, more than any insult, breaks them. People are wired for predictability. Dialogue gives them rules, roles, a rhythm to follow. But silence? Silence is chaos. It offers no pattern, no comfort, no reassurance that the mask is still on straight. And so, they panic. They start scanning you like prey. They ask themselves, did I say something wrong? Is he judging me? Why doesn't she respond? What is he thinking? Their mind collapses inward. Their ego, so inflated in noise, now gasps in the quiet. The silence becomes unbearable, not because it hurts, but because it reveals. It unmasks them, forces them to hear their own voice bounce back. Every insecurity they've tried to cover now echoes louder. Every bluff, every false confidence begins to crack. And in that stillness, they bleed. You haven't moved. You haven't raised your voice. You haven't even blinked. But you've already won. Because silence is pressure. Psychological pressure. It builds in the gut, not the ears. And when someone is used to controlling the conversation, to leading the dance, silence steals the floor. This is why manipulators fear it. Because their tactics depend on reaction. Gaslighting only works when you explain yourself. Control only thrives when you engage. Toxic power only holds when you respond. But when you don't, they freeze. They unravel. They panic. They throw more words at you, louder now, trying to provoke, trying to make you speak. Because your silence reminds them of a truth they cannot face. They are nothing without your attention. And that is terrifying. This is no longer about communication. It's warfare. Your stillness becomes a kind of dominance, not aggressive, not theatrical, but slow and suffocating, like a calm before the collapse. You start to notice things, not just what they say, but what they hide between the words. The nervous shifts, the overcompensations, the contradictions, the micro-explosions of someone whose mask is slipping. And you say nothing, because you don't need to. You've become the observer, the threat that doesn't strike, because it doesn't have to. You listen like a hunter. You let them reveal their fears, without realizing it. You let their own words become their undoing. And every second you hold that silence, the tension grows. It tightens around their throat. It echoes in their chest. Because now, you are no longer responding to them. They are responding to you. This is not submission. This is psychological authority. Not because you yelled, but because you chose not to. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of self-mastery. The true warrior doesn't waste breath on defense. He doesn't argue with shadows. He watches. He waits. He lets the enemy destroy themselves. And the enemy? It's not just the manipulator. It's not just the narcissist. It's every part of them that depends on being seen, heard, validated. And when you deny them that, they fall. Because silence, real silence, is judgment. Even if you never meant it to be, even if you're just present, they'll feel it, and they'll break. So don't be fooled by the noise. Don't rush to fill the gap. Don't explain what doesn't need explaining. Let them talk. Let them overreach. Let them expose themselves in desperation. You just stay. Stay in that storm, unmoving, untouched. Because that's when silence becomes something else entirely. Not just a defense, but a weapon. And if you can hold it long enough, the next phase begins. When you don't just disturb them, you start to control them. The Übermensch doesn't speak to be understood. He speaks because truth demands it. And only when it does. His silence is not absence. It is sovereignty. He does not debate. He does not explain. He does not ask for the stage, because his life is the performance. He doesn't defend his ideas. He is his ideas, walking, breathing, refusing to dilute them for comfort. And that's why they hate him, because they can't define him. He does not belong to their moral games. He doesn't submit to the rituals of guilt, of apology, of polite disfigurement. While others shout to be noticed, he listens in stillness. While they flail to appear righteous, he stands, untouched, unmoved. And his silence? It isn't indifference. It's judgment. Cold, precise, unblinking. Like a wolf in the dark, he does not announce his presence. He waits, watches, understands, not to manipulate, but to see clearly. Because when he speaks, it is not a comment, it is verdict. The Übermensch is not passive. He is tension under control, a blade inside velvet, a bomb disguised as breath. He doesn't overpower by force, he destabilizes by presence. His silence is not a gap between words. It is the full weight of his awareness, pressing down on everyone in the room. And it burns, because it reveals who is posturing, who is begging, who still needs applause to feel real. His silence is not an act. It is not performative. It is earned, because he no longer craves understanding. He no longer needs agreement. He has buried that need deep beneath his feet. That's why when he speaks, people listen, not out of admiration, but gravity. Because his words aren't just sounds, they are consequences. He is not here to fit in. He is here to reshape the space he enters. You feel him before he says a word. And that presence, is what overthrows thrones. Because presence is the true power. Authority is not found in how loudly you talk, but in how much you don't need to. The Übermensch doesn't chase followers. He doesn't play status games. He doesn't shrink to make you comfortable. He is not interested in being seen. He is interested in being. And that being, whole, unfragmented, unconcerned, is a direct attack on everything the world tries to condition into you. His silence doesn't ask for respect. It extracts it, without permission, without request. Because in him, there is nothing left to prove. He has walked through his own fire. He has stripped away every false need. He has stood alone long enough to no longer fear it. So now, when others posture, he sees through it. When they preach, he watches the performance. When they seek reaction, he offers only silence, and it breaks them. Because they're not used to a person who cannot be manipulated. They're not used to someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't explain, doesn't bend. He is the embodiment of psychological gravity. Others circle him, trying to pull him into their orbit, but he is the fixed star, the black hole, the center. So if you still feel the need to speak to be seen, you are still on the leash, still dancing for scraps, still trapped in the herd. But if you can walk into a room and need nothing, not praise, not approval, not applause, then you begin to see, you begin to unmask, you begin to dominate, not through force, but through refusal. Refusal to perform, refusal to flinch, refusal to collapse into their comfort. The Übermensch is not above suffering. He has suffered more deeply than most. But he has burned everything false. And now, in the ashes, he stands, still, quiet, dangerous. And in that silence, you will either rise to meet him or be devoured by your own noise. You think you're peaceful, but look closer. That isn't peace, it's sedation. It's the obedience of someone who's been trained not to disturb, not to demand, not to exist too loudly. You call it maturity, balance, emotional intelligence. But is it? Or is it just a silence that's been drilled into your bones by fear? You weren't born docile. You were made that way, conditioned, groomed, softened, until the sharp edges of your will dulled under the weight of keeping the peace. Every time you avoided a conflict, someone else's will replaced your own. Every time you smiled instead of saying no, you vanished a little more. Every time you said, "It's not worth the fight," what you really meant was, "I'm not worth the space." Let that land. Not fighting isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's just the absence of courage. They told you that silence is noble, that turning the other cheek makes you strong. But who does that silence serve? Because while you bite your tongue, others build empires on your submission. While you keep the peace, they make the rules. While you shrink, they expand. And you? You call it virtue. But deep down, you know it isn't. It's survival. It's fear wrapped in moral robes. It's the voice of the slave, pretending it chose to kneel. This is the morality Nietzsche spat on. The morality of the weak. The morality that says, be small, be good, be agreeable. Wait for crumbs and call them enough. But you weren't made for crumbs. And this version of silence, the one that crushes your spine, the one that leaves you aching in the dark, whispering regrets into the pillow, this is not strength. This is crucifixion, a daily death. And if you keep choosing it, you will vanish. Quietly, politely, forever. So now the choice arrives. Will you keep dying in silence? Or will you birth a new one? Because there is another silence. A silence that doesn't surrender. A silence that doesn't obey. A silence that doesn't apologize for existing. This silence is sovereign. It is not the silence of submission, but the silence of someone who knows they don't need to explain themselves to anyone. Ever. It is presence. It is power restrained. It is the stillness of someone who has faced their own demons and walked away with nothing left to prove. And this silence? It terrifies. Because it cannot be manipulated. It doesn't beg for understanding. It doesn't flinch when doubted. It doesn't retreat when questioned. It stands. While others scramble for approval, it watches. While they shout, plead, posture, it holds the ground. And in that holding, something shifts. Rooms change. Tension rises. Masks slip. Not because you've threatened anyone, but because they feel you. This is the silence Nietzsche wrote for. Not the silence of the broken, but the silence of the reborn. You've been quiet out of fear. Now you must learn to be quiet out of choice. Not to keep peace, but to impose it. You must kill the first silence. the one that enslaved you, and in its ashes, forge the second, the one that makes people tremble, that makes rooms pause, that makes power shift without a sound, not because you said anything, but because you didn't need to. And when you master that silence, when you let it replace the hollow echoes of your past submission, you'll no longer have to chase your place in the world. You'll become the place. So now, ask yourself, how many times have you mistaken being quiet for being in control? How many times have you left your truth unsaid, not out of wisdom, but out of fear? That version of silence must die, and what rises in its place must be unshakable. The world doesn't need your politeness. It needs your presence. Become the silence that no one dares to ignore, not by raising your voice, but by never lowering your worth again. You've been silent before, but that silence was surrender. It was fear dressed in virtue. It was the voice you swallowed, the fight you fled, the truth you buried to survive the room. Now, that silence must die, because a new one is being born, a silence that does not beg, a silence that does not flinch, a silence that commands. No longer a hiding place, now a throne. No longer the pause of fear, now the stillness of judgment. No longer the silence that betrayed you, now the silence that frees you. This isn't about talking less, it's about becoming more. Because the world doesn't need more noise, it needs more presence. It needs the few who know when not to speak and why. Look back at your life. How many moments did you hand away your power? How many times did you let someone rewrite your story just to keep the peace? And now, look inward. Ask, will my silence keep betraying me? Or will it finally become what it was meant to be? A sword. If this silence speaks to something buried in you, then let your next words be a declaration, not a performance. Comment, I choose the silence that commands respect. Not for me, not for them, but to mark the moment you chose yourself. And if this cut into you, if you saw your reflection in the silence, share this with someone still asleep, still talking, still performing, still begging for a voice in rooms not meant to hold them. Wake them. The age of performers is ending. It's time for the silent to rise,